This is David Applefield in Red Bank, New Jersey, and I'm reaching out to a great friend, a great leader, Don Bonker, former congressman from the state of Washington, had been in office for 14 years, came into office in 1974, author of a book called A Higher Calling, just out, Faith and Politics in the Public Square. Gosh, there's not a more apt subject than faith and politics and moral leadership in America today. Welcome, Don.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to be with you and to have this conversation.
You know, Don, it really struck me that you write in the prologue of your book that you tried to arrange an inner album of images and put words to it in the writing of a memoir, but you wanted to go beyond memoir. You said that the line of inquiry here was rather a joyful epiphany. It wasn't so much a memoir that I was eager to write, but a call to action. The chronology of my life may have some fleeting interest to the generations that follow or to the occasional researcher, but what I really want to be remembered are the things I'm still fighting for. So I think today we need to talk a little bit about those things that you're talking about and that you still are fighting for. And that is essentially moral leadership. Give us an appraisal of how you see, it's a huge question, but how you see the country at this time and the lack of moral leadership that we're suffering from.
Well, that's a good opening question. What's lacking today is moral leadership. We have seen it in the past. It was on display when I served in Congress during the 1970s and 80s, Democrats and Republicans alike. Their personal traits were of character, integrity. They had collegial outreach to one another across party lines. So it was more about civility. Today, it is far more combative. It's because our culture has become highly polarized. That spills over to the nation's capital. And today we see that it's highly partisan. And so those traits are probably still there, but they're not on display in the Senate chamber and in the House of Representatives, because today there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of respect. It's all about partisanship, and that's taking us down the wrong path.
I think in a way you're being kind, because we've never seen the degree of moral bankruptcy on a daily basis coming from the White House down. What do you think? What do we do as concerned citizens, as voters in an election year? How do people demand a different kind of a type of leader and a type of leadership and get back to decency? What do we do?
Well, elected leaders, governors, senators, congressmen, are representative of the constituency, the people who voted them into office. And if there's values that are lacking now in our culture, that's being represented now in the Congress. And I think what we see in the White House today is a lack of moral values, is setting a role model, a higher standard. Those are lacking in today's political system. And I don't think we're going to get the senators and congressmen to switch quickly where they are now into embracing these values. It's going to have to be in our society. And one thing this pandemic may do is bring the people of this country to their knees. Yes, that's not a good thing. That's what happened in the Great Depression. And we came out of it better and stronger than before.
Well, that's an excellent point, considering one, you have a lot to say about moral leadership, but you're also one of your areas of expertise is the economy and trade, and you've published a great deal about that. without deviating too much from our key subject here, which is really the kind of leaders that we need and what's gone wrong and what you call for, your call of action in your book. How will do you think the economy is just going to deteriorate and suffer to a point where we will have a larger spiritual awakening?
Yes. With respect to COVID-19, there are three phases. Phase one is a health crisis. It is a huge challenge in terms of our hospitals and the kind of medications that we have to deal with this horrible problem. And that is the priority. Phase one is health. Phase two is economic. 30 million people plus unemployed, businesses across America's heartland shutting down and many going bankruptcy. This is horrible. It's impacting everyone's lives. But the third phase is long-term, economic, because the Federal Reserve Board, the executive branch, the Congress are throwing trillions and trillions of dollars into the system, sometimes just for political reasons, so the economy doesn't become a negative while they're in office. But in the future, that's going to have consequences. Our debt was huge before we got into this phase, and it's going to get much, much worse. So what that means in the long term is our federal budget's going to have to pay off that debt, which means a larger percentage will be going to pay the debt. It will put pressure on the Congress to either increase taxes or lower services, like reductions of Medicare and Social Security. You cannot ignore these problems in the long term, but that's what we're doing at the moment.
So do you think those who are going to need to rely on our Social Security system in 10 years or 20 years should be particularly worried?
Yes. And I think it's more for our children, grandchildren, because not only are they going to feel the fallout of a budget deficit, they're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices. They're going to, like a family man, if you went out and borrowed $5 million and told your family, oh, we're just going to have a good time. And, oh, incidentally, kids, you and your children are going to have to pay off that $5 million. That's where we are.
Wow. Yeah.
We are coping now with two cataclysmic events. One is COVID-19 and the other is Donald Trump. He has transformed our political system like we've never seen before. He is not a Republican. He is Donald Trump, because his positions are contrary to the Republican Party's doctrine of free trade, of being tough on Russia, and the list goes on. Deficits. They used to be the deficit hawks, but it is now the Donald Trump Party. So he's not only redefining the political system, but he's setting different standards, contrary to our traditions of having values in our political system, moral leadership. We've seen that on display by both Democrats and Republicans over the years. History will record him as the worst president ever in our country.
You came into Congress when Jimmy Carter came in.
Actually, I had 2 years of Gerald Ford before Carter came on.
Right. We don't talk very much about Gerald Ford anymore these days.
He was a transition president.
He was. But Jimmy Carter marked you in a very positive, strong way, and he's a highly spiritual man.
His signature issue on foreign policy was human rights. Now that is something embedded in values, in his faith, human rights. And that was a beacon light that shined around the world and gave hope to many. And for dictators, it was an alarm that was going off. But he had difficulty convincing the State Department to embrace this idea of human rights integral to our foreign policy, because we had alignments with dictatorships in South America to curtail Russia's influence. I was chairman of the subcommittee on human rights at the time, And he wasn't pleased with how the State Department was taking on this issue, so he asked me to help. So I put legislation into the State Department bill that mandated certain things about human rights, including preparing an annual report on human rights conditions country by country.
And you saw that played a part in defining America's stature in the world.
Well, it was Ronald Reagan who used that term, beacon light, and that says volumes. In other words, America was providing the moral leadership, and it served as a role model for other leaders around the world. And I think Barack Obama really fulfilled that promise in the Paris Accord on Environment and in the nuclear agreement. Emphasis on peace, making this a safer, better world. He brought out the best in this. And Donald Trump is lacking in any values of any kind. Everybody knows this, even his strong allies. He's not a man of moral character, but he has the most extraordinary influence over 40% of the people in this country, and that's what sustains him today and perhaps in this upcoming election.
It's been a downward slide from the days from when you retired from Congress to where we are today. This didn't happen overnight. We've seen a deterioration of our culture and our society that has permitted Donald Trump to attain the power that he has.
There are three pillars of a democracy. One is free and fair elections. The second is an independent and free media. And the third is an independent judiciary. And so these have all been the bedrocks of our democracy in this country, as envisioned by our founding fathers. Today, on media, Trump is trying to totally discredit media. Even though they're reporting the facts, they're trying to hold them accountable, he discredits them. And also he has a propaganda mechanism in Fox News. This is what Hitler did. It was all about propaganda, so you could shape public opinion. Secondly, free and fair elections. I was an election official, and the one thing I appreciated, integrity in our electoral system. It's not federally mandated, not even state, it's local. And it had integrity. Now, thanks to the Russia hacking, and we're seeing other problems occurring almost in every state with our election system. What that's going to do is undermine people's confidence. And that means Trump or somebody else can challenge the elections results saying it's flawed. Third is on judiciary. This is the most important, the judiciary. When I was in Congress, the Senate would approve nominees by Democrats and Republican presidents. Always there was integrity. The Republican would nominate somebody who had tremendous credentials. The American Bar Association would do a clearance process. Sure, there were differences, but there was integrity first. Today, Donald Trump is nominating people who have no legal credentials, does not supported by legal organizations like the American Bar Association. They are political operatives. No legal credentials, but political loyalty.
How do we bring together faith in a larger sense of the term, and our political life and our belief in a spiritual better place and the qualities of the human spirit?
Well, you're right. Often I would be asked, how could I be both a Christian and a Democrat? And I did respond, or I should have responded, that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, not an elephant. That's fun. But the other is that religion has also become highly politicized. And it all started with the moral majority, which became a movement of the Republican Party, the people who were behind the strategy. And so they've made the political agenda a lot more important than the teachings and the principles of Jesus. And that's the problem today. but they have greatly politicized the faith to where they are more committed to Donald Trump than they are to Jesus.
Where do you go for believing in a better future? You have kids and you have grandkids, and you're a person who cares deeply about the future of the nation, and you've committed your life to public service. Give us something to believe in that will make us feel like the fight needs to be carried forward.
Well, your last question is the toughest. Well, we are in a crisis, health, financial, political, as we discussed. But we've been in a crisis before as a nation. We always come out of it stronger and better. But a lot of that depends on our leadership too, that will lead us like Franklin Roosevelt did out of the Great Depression through this World War II. So hopefully in the near future, we'll have the leadership that will make this a better country. And I think that people during this period need to go deeper about who they are and what's important and what's their purpose in life. And hopefully the title of my book, A Higher Calling, will give them inspiration to move in that direction.
It's a fantastic read. I was grateful to be able to, to have an early read and help you along a little bit on it. But the book is getting tremendous reviews, and it's on Amazon and other online sources. This is a great time for people to be reading the book. What's the best way to reach Don Bonker? Well,
I've got a website, and it's a www.ahighercallingbook.com. Otherwise, they can order it on Amazon. But those who have read it, the feedback has been encouraging because it's a memoir of sorts, because there are a lot of wonderful stories, serendipity in the book, but also it's taken on meaning and purpose. And that's how you started this conversation.
Don Bonker, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Stay healthy. Regards to your family, your grandchildren, and everybody. A Higher Calling. It's really an important read right now. Thank you.
Thank you, David Applefield. A pleasure.